Screen is this.
Check, check.
The front seats cost the same, so y'all.
Where the file is all about anywhere. As long as you're on the page. Yeah. But we get where we're not gonna share
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Fayetteville Tech Community College on behalf of the Lafayette Society. We are so excited for you to join us for tonight's special lecture as we celebrate part of history that I think will be new to many of you, but your eyes will be open tonight. You'll get to meet somebody new from American Revolutionary history. And it's my hope that you'll walk away from tonight not only knowing somebody new, but sharing his story. I want to share a quote from the Marquis de Lafayette. "The moment I heard of America, I loved her. The moment I knew she was fighting for freedom, I burnt with a desire of bleeding for her." My name's Scott McCosh. I'm the Senior Director of Military and Veteran Programs here at Fayetteville Tech. And Lafayette, the 19-year-old warrior that joined the American cause, is an amazing story. But tonight you're going to get to hear about another Lafayette whom we are excited to introduce to you. But before we do that, we want to say a special thank you to our senior administrators here at Fayetteville Tech who have come out to support us tonight. So Dr. Murdisworth, our Senior VP, thank you so much. And next to her, causing trouble, Dr. DeSandra Washington. And we're so glad to have you both here, as well as many of our faculty and staff. I want to make a special shout out to our students who have come. They signed in there to get credit. I told one if they didn't move from the back row to the front, they couldn't have credit anyway. So if you're a student, if you'll just wave your hand, a student at FTCC, we're so glad to have you. And before we get started with too much pomp tonight, I have a special announcement on behalf of the board. I'm super excited. And so I'm going to invite our board president of the Lafayette Society, Ms. Ebony Warfield, and I always mess up the Graham. Thank you. I mess up the hyphen and I don't want to mess it up. Ms. Ebony is here and she's going to bring some greetings. But before she does, I want to make an exciting announcement. Each year, the Lafayette Society partners with an educational institution to establish a fund through their development offices and foundation to support students in higher education across Fayetteville, Cumberland County, this beautiful city named after Lafayette. And this year, during Giving Tuesday in November, the Lafayette Society has voted that those contributions will go to Fayetteville Tech Community College to establish a scholarship in the name of the Lafayette Society to support military-connected students. And we are so excited. And so with that announcement, I want to invite our new director of the FTCC Foundation, Jennifer Hammond, to come on up and share with you.
Much. Hello, good evening. My name is Jennifer McFadden-Hammond. I'm the Executive Director of FTCC Foundation. So happy to be here tonight representing the foundation and to be here for this wonderful event in our namesake city. FTCC Foundation supports FTCC students in myriad ways through scholarships, emergency assistance, and through discretionary funding through specific departments. We are so very grateful that you all included us in giving your treasures, and hope to be very good stewards of the fund that you raised in the name of Fayetteville Tech and to support those military affiliated students. So thank you so much.
And I would be remiss if I didn't do this before I hand the mic over to Ebony, and that is to say a special thanks to my date that I'm here with tonight, my mom, Kay McConch. Oh, thank you.
I need my eyes, and I am not as energetic as Jennifer. I don't have that same kind of energy. But again, my name is Ebony Warfield Graham. I am the new president of the Lafayette Society. And on behalf of the Lafayette Society, I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone that joined us tonight. We really thank you for coming out to this amazing event. Before we get started and before I introduce the speaker of the hour, I'd like to just do a little housekeeping and just share a couple of things that we have going on for the Lafayette Society. First, our creativity contest is now live and on our website. If you didn't see last year's poetry and videos, you missed out, but we have some tidbits on our website, and you should go to that website at www.lafayettesociety.org. It's on there, and so are all the rules and the contest stuff for this year. We have video poetry as well as visual arts. So you can see all the guidelines and the submission details on our website. And also, in addition to tonight's event for the birthday celebration weekend, tomorrow we have a birthday celebration where you can come on out and get a free cupcake. We have it at the Fellowship Hall for the Hay Street United Methodist Church. That is downtown at 320 Hay Street. So come on out and enjoy that with us. We'll have a few other things going on, so please come out and join us for that. And don't forget your free cupcake now while they last. Now I'd like to introduce the man of the hour and give you a little bit about him if you don't already know. Dr. Kelly is a world-class performer, storyteller, speaker, and motivator. He holds a PhD in communication and performance studies from UNC Chapel Hill. I'm a Duke fan, but that's okay. And currently teaches here at Fayetteville Technical Community College, where he empowers students through public speaking and intercultural communication. He is the founder of Legacy Heirs Production, a platform that he uses for storytelling to educate, entertain, and uplift our communities. A proud veteran of the U.S. Air Force, Dr. Kelly has worn many hats: a nonprofit leader, a youth pastor, university counselor, an award-winning salesman, and more. As a professional actor and storyteller, he has performed across the country for schools, civic groups, and major storytelling organizations. Locally, you know him as the co-host of the crossover radio show on WIDU. Yep, I said that right. And through his work with the Arts Council of Fayetteville, Cumberland County. Beyond the stage and the classroom, his passion is clear: empowering others, especially our underserved youth, through performance, love, and purpose. Please join me in welcoming the one and only Dr. Sonny Kelly as he gives us a piece of living history with his interpretation of James Armistead Lafayette.
Thank you, Madam President. Hail to the chief. Well, I'm honored to be here tonight with my entire nuclear family, actually. I want to just recognize Langston Kelly on the flute and vocals. Sterling Kelly on audio-visual technology. So let's get started. It's storytelling time. Now, when I say it's storytelling time, I want you to say, tell me a story. It's storytelling time. I said it's storytelling time. I said it's storytelling time. Son, let's tell them a story. In 2026, this nation will celebrate the 250th anniversary of its founding. And I am honored to be a part of what is called the 250 Project. And what we found is that though this founding was uncertain and precarious, this perfectly imperfect project called the United States of America was born on July 4th, 1776, when that Second Continental Congress adopted the Constitution. So to this end, I worked with the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, the state archives, as well as the state library, to put together a piece called The Ongoing Fight for Freedom, Stories of Black Veterans. But tonight, we have something special for you. I've been able to work closely with my colleagues, Dr. Christopher Thrasher and Scott McCosh, to curate a special story just for Fayetteville, just for the Lafayette Society. We call it The Tale of Two Lafayettes. This, everyone, is an opportunity for all of us to come together to celebrate our heroes, foreign and domestic, free and enslaved, those who risked life and limb to fight for this land of the free and home of the brave. Men like Marie, Joseph, Paul, Yves Roche, Gilbert du Motier, Marquis de Lafayette. That's the last time you'll hear me say that tonight. AKA Lafayette, after whom this very city and this very society are named. And then there are also those men whose stories are less known, but just as important and inspirational. Men like James Armistead Lafayette. On one hand, you have the Marquis de Lafayette, a free Frenchman, a brave and talented warrior who took his talents across the sea to fight on American soil when he joined us for the American Revolution in 1777. On the other hand, we have James Armistead Lafayette, an enslaved American, also brave and talented, but his skills were used behind the scenes, beyond the battlefields. His excellent espionage and insightful intelligence was used to fight and win battles before they could even be fought. Both men, great men, both men, our heroes. These two stories, these two skill sets have coalesced and connected into an often untold story of collaboration, heroic and historic collaboration. A story one part French, one part enslaved African narrative, 100% American. As we consider the story of these two great Lafayettes, I invite you to join me in this opportunity to come together indivisible with our ever-evolving, eclectic, and enduring stories that comprise our story, yours and mine, our family story. It has been here for longer than anyone in this room can remember, and it will continue as long as we're willing to tell and listen to these stories. We are the embodiment of our forefathers' commitment to these self-evident truths that all men are created equal, although they didn't mean all men at the time or any women before the amended sequels. Once alienated from my own unalienable rights, here I stand, a product of our ancestors' struggles and plights. From indentured servitude to expanding frontiers, from chattel slavery to the Trail of Tears, from migrating multitudes facing xenophobic attitudes, they live in you and me. It's like Sister Maya Angelou once raved, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I am. You are. We are the dreams and the hopes of our ancestors, yours and mine. And what I want us to remember tonight is that these stories that collide and coalesce and collaborate, like the Marquis and James, they are the stories of a warrior and the stories of a spy, the stories of a French mercenary and of a Virginian patriot. For centuries, the U.S. coins and bills have been minted with that famous term, e pluribus unum, out of many, one. Every individual story makes the whole stronger and richer. Ironically, I was reminded of this by a foreigner on American soil, much like the Marquis was when he came to fight in the Revolutionary War. Back in 2018, a Nigerian author and speaker named Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie came to the first public university in the United States of America, also known as the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And as a graduate student, I was pursuing my PhD with the post 9/11 GI Bill. And I remember hearing Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie say, stories matter. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity.
As I went down in the valley to
See, I believe in the power of stories. I believe that the stories we tell and the stories we listen to, they can connect us while they construct us. They can bind us while they build us. They can link us while they lead us to a better tomorrow together. So tonight, if you don't mind, we're going to do a little storytelling, little repair work, as Adichie would say. And as we do this work, we're going to connect and link and bind together through the story of one of America's own homegrown heroes, one of its most famous and faithful freedom fighters. Well, famous after tonight. His name is James Armistead Lafayette. And I hope that everyone will share this story after you learn it tonight. Or, as he was known in his latter years, just James Fayette. And on a personal note, as a U.S. Air Force veteran, as the son, grandson, and great-grandson of Army, Navy, and Marine veterans, and the proud husband of a recently retired Air Force officer. Yes, please. It is a special honor for me to stand before you today to share this historic story of heroism and hope. But before we dig into those stories, I suppose I should start with my own story and just how exactly the Marquis and James entered my life. So I'm going to take y'all back to June of 1998. Fewer wrinkles, more hair on my head, less on my face. I was an Air Force ROTC cadet graduating from the Stanford University. And at my commissioning ceremony, I recited the oath of office, transforming myself into an official U.S. Air Force officer. I, Sonny Kelly, having been appointed a second lieutenant in the United States Air Force, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. My pop cried like a baby. Pop was a barrel-chested, baritone brown brother from the bottom of Texas. And now, about 3 decades before, he'd said a similar oath when he became a Marine. Now, son, listen. It was tough coming up the way I did. I never wanted you to go through what I went through. I'm proud of you, son. And listen, America's a great country, but I never knew how great America could be till I got out the South. Now, you got to remember, my father was raised in the deeply divided, legally segregated South, Texas, in the 1940s and 50s. And so the things we see on TV about the civil rights movement, he lived through his childhood and teenage years. And well, somehow he still found a way to be one of the most patriotic people I've ever met. My father loved his country so much that he served as a Marine of all things. It was hard work. It was dedication. But he loved his country. And unfortunately, sometimes he didn't feel like his country loved him back. So the Marines for him was, in some ways, a form of escape. Ironically, the son of a man who escaped the South in the 60s to join the Marines would return to the South in the 90s on purpose with the Air Force. I became an intelligence officer. So my first station after gaining a premier education in international relations at Stanford University was at Goodfellow Air Force Base in San Angelo, Texas, the very state from which my father fled. And I was put through a 9-month graduate level program where we learned how to collect, interpret, and disseminate information to the warfighter for maximal success. And yet I think about James Armistead, no formal education, enslaved, and yet with expert skills. This man collected, interpreted, and disseminated invaluable intelligence and information to the American warfighters during the Revolutionary War that arguably led to the very winning of that war. My First duty station was right here in Fayetteville, North Carolina, the land name for the Marquis himself. And I didn't want to be here. I was stationed at what was then Pope Air Force Base on Fort Bragg and is now Pope Army Airfield, still on Fort Bragg for now. We'll see what we do with that. And I remember that the one redeeming thing about this, after I'd been here for a year or so, was meeting my wife, Elena, another Air Force officer. And I will always remember that when I asked her in my own charming way, "Girl, where you been all my life?" She responded confidently, "Fayetteville, North Carolina." That's when I knew there was something special about this Fayetteville. Now, it was the Air Force and God that brought me here, but it was indeed love that kept me. Now, Elena continued to serve in active duty as well as the reserve until she retired last month. Now, just 3 months after our wedding, though, if you go back to 2003, Elena was deployed to Iraq. And I watched as this courageous woman, she switched out of her hand-selected wedding gown for government-issued desert combat uniform without hesitation. And together, along with many other brothers and sisters in arms, Elena and I, we faced the global threats that came with the time when we served, spanning multiple continents. We braved the horrors of 9/11, and we persevered through the insane operations tempo and persistent trauma that comes from fighting wars with enemies known and unknown, in places known and unknown, sometimes for reasons known and unknown. But we made it, and we're still making it. My short time as an Air Force officer and my years living as an Air Force spouse have helped me to understand just a little bit of what the bittersweetness was that our early ancestors, the patriots who fought the Revolutionary War, must have faced. Being deployed far away from home, like the Marquis de Lafayette, who served here in the U.S. from 1777 to 1781, or like James Armistead, constantly facing the possibility of death, discomfort, and dignity, while bearing the burden of always being excellent in multiple fields. He was a servant, he was a laborer, he was a spy, he was a scout, and an intelligence officer. These men lived out the Air Force values that I was trained to live by: integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all that we do. I just want to say that it is my honor to stand upon their shoulders and to find solace in their shadows. Their stories find roots in patriots who fought for freedom before they were even born. And they have forged new routes that converge and coalesce with our stories today. So if you don't mind, tonight, I just want to take us on a journey to explore those historic roots that forge these heroic routes of the two famous Lafayettes. I'm especially honored tonight to be a part of a long legacy of over 300 years of Black veterans, men and women, who have fought like James Lafayette, fought since the foundation of this nation and before for its most valued ideal: freedom. They call me Freeman. That's a name that many of us around here taking and calling ourselves free men, because that's what we are. We weren't all slaves, you know. And see, my great-grandparents were sold here as indentured servants back in the early 1600s. And see, back then, they worked in rice fields. Rice was the cash crop in the colonial North Carolina. And then my grandparents and my great-grandparents, they worked long and hard from sun up to sundown. Heat so sweltering it would swallow you whole. But they worked long and hard enough to buy their freedom. So I was born free. So we took to calling ourselves free men. Now, most of us don't know, can't quite recall, or can't quite pronounce the surnames of our African sires. So we just call ourselves what we are, free men. And that was a problem for many of our white compatriots. A lot of them didn't want their slaves getting the wrong idea. they created here in North Carolina, Virginia, all through the South, some of the worst slave codes you can imagine. A slave code is a law that you make to make sure that slaves stay slaves and free Negroes stay in their place. We weren't allowed to vote, hold office. We couldn't bear arms, couldn't even meet in groups. Now, we all knew when to meet down over by the brush arbor for a little fellowship. But they demeaned us with their laws. But let me tell you, when they needed us, when the French or the Spanish or the local Indian tribes waged war against them, guess who they conscripted into their militias? We've been fighting right alongside them. Now, sometimes people ask me, they say, Freeman, why do you stay here? You can ask me. Go ahead and ask me. I'm glad you asked. Because it's my people have been here for longer than many of these other people. I love the place. And don't think we didn't fight back. We found our way to fight back, like the Stono Rebellion. Stono Rebellion back in South Carolina, 1739. They say it all began with a slave from Angola named Jimmy. There were 20 of us on the plantation where I lived. More of us than them. But we were also frightened. For so long, these British colonists, they had controlled our bodies and our lives, but they could not control our minds or our spirits. So, early in the morning, September 9th, 1739, I met with some of my brothers near the Stono River. We attacked a local store that sold ammunition and weapons. We stole the ammunition and weapons, and we marched through the streets. We went from plantation to plantation, delivering our brothers and sisters from bondage. We marched in the streets with banners that read liberty, and we shouted, liberty, liberty, liberty. After a few hours, we had marched 10 miles. We had an army of over 50 men, and we killed 25 of our oppressors until the South Carolina militia caught us in a firestorm. Most of us were killed that day. Some escaped. Others were captured, tortured, sold into the West Indian slave trade where conditions were much worse. Now you could ask me if it was worth it. Go ahead, ask me. I'm glad you asked. I will answer you in the words of your great British storyteller, Mr. William Shakespeare. To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether it is nobler in their mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing in them to die. To sleep, perchance to dream. To take arms against a sea of trouble, if only to see the light of liberty and to dream for a few precious moments. Yes, it was worth it. So these are ancestors that came far before the Revolutionary War, but they blazed the path and started the trail toward this call for freedom. Now, the problem with the Stono Rebellion for us here in the southeastern seaboard during the colonial time, at least those of us of color, was that it changed the game. It struck fear into the hearts of all British and white slave owners and colonists. And as Master Yoda has taught us in his timeless wisdom, fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. The law also began to respond to that fear. The slave codes became harsher and harsher. The laws about manumission, that is the freeing of slaves, became so harsh that even if a slave owner wanted to free his or her slaves, they could only do it with government permission. They had to go through an entire trial. Similar laws were passed in the surrounding colonies throughout South Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, Mississippi. And perhaps the most ominous of these laws was the one regarding runaway slaves. If a runaway refused to surrender immediately, the colonists who found them, black or white or Native American, was given license to kill them on the spot with no legal consequences to the shooter. In other words, anyone who valued their liberty over the colony's right to their free labor was considered a combatant on sight. Yet another blow to the fight for freedom. Now, by 1757, North Carolina was home to over 40,000 people of African descent. The overwhelming majority of them were people of color, were people enslaved. But among them were various freedom fighters who remain mostly nameless today. They educated themselves while it was illegal. They developed intricate interstate underground railroad systems for freedom, with and without the help of white abolitionists. They created secret maroon communities in places like the Great Dismal Swamp. And don't underestimate those who stayed. They too found a way to fight for freedom in their own way. They held on to their culture, their music, their faith, their dance, their song, their stories. See, for them, laying hold to their humanity in a world that framed them as less than human was an act of defiance in a world that did not see them as any more than chattel slaves. A world that was changing rapidly. By the mid-1770s, calls for freedom from the British Crown rose amongst the colonists. And in 1775, the colonists finally took up arms to fight for freedom. Meanwhile, slavery existed in every one of the 13 colonies at that time. Then, in 1776, the founding fathers of this great nation signed that foundational, indelible declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Before the ink could dry on that amazing foundational document, there were over 600,000 people living in chattel slavery, treated as animals, the opposite of freedom in this same great budding nation. And no one dreamt of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness more than them. And the white colonists knew this. So they took to making every Black adult in the colonies, especially in the South, take a pledge of allegiance to the patriot cause. They patrolled neighborhoods by night and monitored the coming and going of anyone of African descent. I suppose the thought of a Black man with a rifle struck as much fear in their hearts as that of, well, a British man with the red coat. And I suppose they had reason enough to fear us. Oh, don't mind me. I'm just practicing my British accent. I do so enjoy speaking the King's English, especially when he promises freedom and land. Sergeant Thomas Peters, reporting for duty. I was stolen from my native Nigeria when I was a young man, sold to a farmer in Wilmington, North Carolina. But I always had a taste for freedom. So when I heard that the British had made it to the Cape Fear coast, spring of '76, I'll never forget it. I broke away from my master along with dozens of others, and we joined a group called the Black Pioneers. We specialize in espionage, sabotage, and trailblazing. We proved to be quite the thorn in the side of the rabble-rousing revolutionaries. Meanwhile, up in Norfolk, Virginia, the Royal Governor Lord Dunmore took to offering to all indentured servants and enslaved people of the colonial rebels freedom if they would take up their arms and fight for His Majesty's crown and dignity. Hundreds of men gathered from all around the colonies and joined Lord Dunmore's Ethiopian regiment. Across the chest of every Negro soldier were the words, "Liberty to slaves." We fought long and we fought hard. But as you know, we lost. And I remember the day when we evacuated New York, 1783. I was blessed enough to make it on a ship that was headed to Canada. But all of my brothers and sisters did not make it. I remember watching from the deck of that ship as I saw my brothers and sisters still in chains, throwing their bodies into the ocean, swimming after the ships to no avail. I made a vow to honor their memory. So when we were in Canada, I became a leader of the Black Loyalists, and I ensured that these brothers of ours, the British, that they kept up their promises. And my persuasive work, well, it served me well. because in 1792, 1,200 of us were relocated to our own country. It was a British colony known as Sierra Leone. We finally had a place to run our own lives in freedom. And finally, after 30 years, I was back home in my native Africa. Now, truth be told, the majority of men of African descent who fought the Revolutionary War fought for the patriot cause. And amongst them, there were many men who were enslaved as well as free. Of the 231,000 colonial army soldiers, over 5,000 were men of African descent. And those men were inspired by the great words of that Declaration of Independence. They fought long, they fought hard. They fought in every battle from Bunker Hill to Yorktown, which brings us to that famous Lafayette, James Armistead. Now, listen. They can have Africa. They can have Canada. They can have all of Europe for all I care. I was born in Virginia, New Kent County. I was born an American. Now, they say I was born somewhere around 1748. Don't quite recall. When you treat folks as possessions, you don't keep track of their records so well. I suppose they took care to my records as much as you do to a horse or a prize pig or the receipt you keep for a tractor. But I knew in my heart that I was free. I was born a slave to a man named John Armistead. And he had a son named William Armistead. Now, William had good records. He was born in 1754. You can mark that. But William and I, we were playmates as kids. As a matter of fact, I was more like his big brother than a slave, if it makes sense to you. Any reading I learned, and any writing, I was right by William, learning. And well, when we got older, William had this spark for freedom, he called it. He wanted to fight for this new country. Well, I didn't have a choice. His daddy had assigned me to be his servant. So I went with William wherever he went, looked after him, pulled him out of messes, like a big brother should. Well, when he decided to join the Virginia militia, I was right there with him. We was in Williamsburg. He became a supply officer, and I became one right with him, just writing down the notes, covering all the supplies. Well, when the capital moved from Williamsburg to Richmond, I was right there with him. I remember, not long after we moved to Richmond, January 5th, 1781, that rascal, that turncoat, that traitor, Benedict Arnold, led a group of troops to burn down Richmond. They burned our buildings. They killed the civilians and the soldiers. They gathered up all the tobacco, threw it into British ships. They robbed us of our dignity and our livelihood. I'll never forgive them for that. To this day, I hate a traitor. Well, we escaped, but we never stopped fighting. And when I learned that my master, John Armistead, had died in 1779, I knew that William and I had only each other. Little brother, big brother, servant, master, but more importantly, compatriots. That spark hit me too. I had a fire for freedom that rose up inside of me. And well, when I heard that General Lafayette himself, America's favorite freedom fighter, was coming to Virginia, I went to William. I said, William, I got to go. I asked him for permission to go and serve General Lafayette. Of course, being the patriot that he was, he released me. I went on to General Lafayette's camp. He was there in New Kent County, the same place where I was born. And I reported for duty. General Lafayette was very gracious and shrewd. He saw I had a skill. He saw that I knew the terrain like the back of my hand, so I could be a scout. He saw that I could speak well. I could count. I could read a little. I could write a little. So he put me to work as a courier. I would travel back and forth between the generals and the battlefields and the field officers, and I would pass the messages. Well, I got to be so good at it that old Lafayette, that sly fox, he had a plan for me. He had a plan for us. See, we had been losing the war this time. We had General Lafayette. We had General Washington, of course. We had the French army and the French navy supporting us, but that was no match against the British. They were the strongest army and navy in the world at that time. They were pummeling us at every battle, beating us down, beating us to every chase. Well, Lafayette had this idea. If we could get an inside man, maybe we could turn things around. I was up for the challenge. So he sent me down to that old rascally scoundrel's camp. I hesitate to say his name, General Arnold. He was now a general in the British Army. I reported to Benedict Arnold's camp right there in Richmond. I remember it was a hot and muggy July evening. I came to him as the night was starting to cover me. He goes there. I just run away from my master. See, Lafayette had this great idea. While he disagreed with most of the colonists about abolition, he wanted slavery to be over. He thought if we could use that as an angle, we could get into the British camps. So he had me pretend to be a runaway slave. I said, I run away from my master, but I want to serve you. I want to be loyal to the king. I almost threw up in my mouth when I said it, but I had to say it. What is your name, boy? James, my master's Armistead. He's a rebel, and I want to fight against him. Please, what are your skills, boy? Well, sir, I can read a bit, I can write a bit, or I know this terrain like the back of my hand. I could be a scout, whatever you need. Follow me, boy. Don't you know they took me right into the tent of General Arnold himself? There he was writing some papers and shouting out commands like he was somebody. It took everything in me not to slit his throat from ear to ear. But I knew my job was not to kill. It was to steal. So while my brothers in the colonial army wore their muskets and their battle armor, I put on a new uniform. I learned to serve with gentility. I also learned to listen. So as I was serving and scouting and guiding, General Arnold thought I was on his side. But at night and through little notes, I would pass messages over to Lafayette, who could figure out what General Arnold was going to do before he even did it. Matter of fact, we got so good at it that in July, General Lafayette attacked General Arnold, ambushed his camp. He was totally unawares. He barely got away by the skin of his teeth. It was like a cat and mouse game. See, I would set him up, they would knock him down. Well, at that point, General Arnold knew he had to get some help. So he went to Lord Cornwallis, also known as General Cornwallis, who was down in Hampton Roads for support. Well, of course, me being his top servant and scout, he brought me along. And so before I knew it, General Cornwallis took me in, and he named me one of his top servants and scouts. I was getting pretty good at this thing. Well, after a while, I would give the information to the Americans and steal the information from the British. So I was serving up tea and crumpets on one hand and gobbling up every morsel of intelligence and knowledge from the British on the other hand. I knew where every ship was, where every boat was, every man, every weapon that was dispositioned all around Southampton. Well, my intelligence was so good that General Arnold realized something was fishy. One day, he came in huffing and puffing, brought all of his officers and servants together. Here, come here, gather. Front and center. So, it appears to me that these Americans have taken on an insider. How do they know what we're going to do before we do it? I think we have a spy in the midst. Oh, and as a traitor myself, I can smell my own kind. So don't think I won't find you. James, front and center. James, do you know who the spy is? I thought I was caught red-handed. I didn't know what to say. No, sir. I don't know who the spy is, but when I find him, I'll kill him with my bare hands. I hate a traitor. I meant that. I do hate a traitor. James, I appreciate your gumption. Well, what do you propose we do, James? Well, sir, I've been thinking about this for a while. What say you send me over to Lafayette camp so I can spy on him, find out who the spy is, and I promise when I find him, I'll kill him with my bare hands. General Arnold bought it. He signed me up, passed it on to General Cornwallis. General Cornwallis said, of course, James is one of our best. Gentlemen, look at James. He is an example. Don't let his dark hue confuse you about the purity of his heart. Don't let it obfuscate the sterling brilliance of his intellect. Go forth, James. Here's your horse and your food and rations. James, don't forget, for crown and country. For crown and country, sir. I didn't mean the crown part. But I did mean country. With my information, I was helping my country to grow. And when this war that was happening all around us, all of a sudden I saw in Virginia, the war was turning around. My information was making a difference. So much so that I was able to convince General Cornwallis that he was outnumbered. So he moved from Hampton Roads down to a little town called Yorktown, 1781. That fall, he thought he was secure. See, he wanted to move up north, meet with General Clinton, and overtake General Washington. But my intelligence made him change direction. So as he fortified his troops down at Hampton Roads, well, that gave enough time for Washington to head on south and for Lafayette to head on east. He was caught between a rock and a hard place. And don't forget old General Rochambeau. We had them all trapped. And the French Navy, when they went to the Chesapeake Bay, set up a blockade that no one even knew about. They bottlenecked them right there in the York River. They didn't know what hit them. It was September 28th, 1781 is when the bombardment started. Lafayette's over here. George Washington's over here. Rochambeau's over here. And the British couldn't go nowhere because they were locked in from Chesapeake Bay. They were trapped. We had them. And it took just 20 days of constant bombardment for them to come out with their hands up and their white flags raising. On the 19th of October, 1781, General Cornwallis himself walked out with over 7,500 men, British and Germans, and they retreated. That was the last major battle of the Revolutionary War. Now, for the next 2 years, there were some skirmishes and some negotiations, but that right there was it. Some say that we won the war at Yorktown. Others would say it was the intelligence that won the war at Yorktown. But I'm a humble man, and I tell you this, whether it was the intelligence or not, I'm proud of what we did. And that, my friends, was something to be proud of. I know that many people don't honor a servant or a scout or a man who never put on a uniform. But I knew from my birth, even when I was born a slave, that I was more than that. And so when the time came and the war ended in 1783, and a law changed in Virginia that allowed manumission, freedom of slaves. Well, William was on board. My little brother said, hey, it's time for you to be free. You've done the work. It helped that I twisted his ear a little bit, like I used to do when he was a boy. But the only problem was when I put my paperwork in, well, there was no record of my service. All the work I'd done as a double agent, but it was secret. Part of my job was to stay clandestine and off the record. So the Virginia General Assembly denied my application. But that old Marquis de Lafayette, when he heard that I was still in bondage, he came all the way back to see me. He wrote a letter to the General Assembly, 1785. I want to read it to you. He said, his intelligence from the enemy's camp were industriously collected and most faithfully delivered. He perfectly acquitted himself with some important commissions I gave him and appears to me entitled to every reward his situation can admit of. Now, I don't understand everything he says with that French accent, but I think he said I did a good job. I can. We were brothers. We understood everything the other said. The fact that this white man would take his time to come back to my hometown and write his support for my freedom, that meant the world to me. Now, it took 2 more years. General Lafayette putting the word in and William Armistead working along with me. But I finally got my freedom. 1787. One of the first things I did was I changed my name from Armistead, which was a slave name, to Lafayette, my new name of freedom, my chosen name. Now, when I sign it Fayette, but I answer to Lafayette as well. But I would take a proudest moment was in 1824. I was an old man. I would be gone in 6 years from there. I remember old Lafayette came back to Yorktown where we'd done all that good work. And he drove his carriage through the streets. Now that would have been enough for me to see that valiant general driving victoriously through the streets, knowing that I was part of that victory. But somehow, some way, in an audience of thousands of people, he saw my black face and he stopped his chariot. He opened that door and stood up and said, "James!" I rushed to him as fast as I could with these old hips and knees. And we embraced, not like a general and his soldier or his spy, but like brothers with the energy of 2 little boys. We won, son. We won. Victoire! Victoire! And that, my friends, well, I reckon that's something to be proud of. So as we wrap up this amazing story of James Armistead Lafayette and the Marquis de Lafayette, I want us to remember that tonight is about more than just a story. It's about our history. So I'm going to leave you with the words of the famous American poet, Amanda Gorman. She says, "It's because being American is more than the pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it." This story is about much more than 2 Lafayettes. This is a story about the power that every one of us has. And we will muster our courage, face our fears, get over our differences, start to tell our stories and listen to our stories, and engage together in the ongoing fight for freedom. For we hold these truths.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Langston Kelly, Charlie Kelly, thank you, thank God, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I will tell you, in the spirit of that wily double agent James Lafayette, I did have a little trick up my sleeve. I wanted to hear my son sing and hear in this new body, this young body, this new song and a new meaning that he can bring to it. But also it makes for a standing ovation automatically because you're right up. You may be seated. God bless you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Tracy, I know whether you remember me. I do. Good to see you. Thank you. Oh, thank God. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you can stay, we want to have a talk back.
We are. We're going to put some chairs up here and discuss.
If you've got the opportunity to stay with us, please do.
Thank you, Scott McCosh. Colonel Type. Thank you, sir. We want to thank our technicians, Justin Longley. Thank you, sir, for getting these mics right. And the visual, thank you. Is that Janan Warren back there? Thank you, Janan. And I don't say this lightly. I want to truly thank Colonel Scott McCosh and Dr. Christopher Thrasher. They literally came to me with this idea and said, Sonny, what do you think? I know you're pretty dynamic. Would you like to do something? I'd heard of James Armistead Lafayette, but I did not know the story. So I'm grateful that I've been given this gift from God to just bring some meat to the story. But it was these guys who had the vision. And they just had faith in me. They said, well, we'll get the space and put Sonny up there and see what happens. So thank you. Thank you, sir. Wow, we did it, y'all. That was the very first time that has ever been performed, ever. So thank you. Thank you.
Y'all, as our panelists come, part of the vision is that just as visitors to Fayetteville learn the story of the Marquis de Lafayette, that they might also learn the story of James Armistead Lafayette. So it's my hope that this will be the first of many performances that Sonny does, but also that it's something that we can capture, that Fayetteville and Cumberland County can allow it to be told to all who come through. So help us make that happen, and you'll find out more about ways to do that in the future. We are so excited. You as well can become a part of the Lafayette Society. It sounds fancy. I was a third string speaker that they got at the last minute when Dr. Thrasher struck out with a couple generals. He said, I know a colonel, didn't know it was a chaplain too necessarily, and ended up on the board. So I'm excited to have a distinguished panel tonight. So if our panelists would come and join Dr. Kelly so we can have a little Q&A.
Come on up here, y'all. Now, these are real historians. I just play one on TV. Good to see you, sir. And what we welcome is questions, comments, and concerns that have to do with any of this. We know we have some students here and people who are interested in theater, so you could ask a theatrical question. A lot of historians or people who are just learning now. Maybe you didn't know you were a history buff until tonight, so you may have some historical questions. Or anything, even about the Lafayette Society. And so, if y'all wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves and saying what the part you play here, so that folks know the capacity in which you'll be speaking.
Sure. Let me. Does this work? Okay. Everybody hear me? My name is Hank Parfit, and I'm a past president of the Lafayette Society. And I am delighted to be here. And I just want to say that's a fantastic performance. I've seen Stephen Seals at Colonial Williamsburg, who plays James Lafayette there. And this just blew me away. It's fantastic.
Thank you, Hank. Thank you.
Again, my name is Ebony Warfield Graham, and I am the current president of the Lafayette Society. And again, amazing. You all almost had me in tears, and I don't like to cry.
And I'm Rob Chaber. I'm a board member of the Lafayette Society and an associate professor of history at Fayetteville State, where I specialize in the era of the American Revolution and French Revolution. And that was really, really well done.
Thank you. Thank you. And so what you all see here is just, there's a QR code to learn about the ongoing fight for freedom and the America 250 initiative. And what I've done is I've been blessed to work with the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources to have curriculum and to have lessons and more specifics and stories of many of the Black veterans who fought since the Revolutionary War and before the colonial period and forward. So if you go to that QR code, you'll find more educational information and also information about how you can bring this show or this kind of performance to your spaces. Well, thank you all. We've got a great team up here. Questions, comments, concerns? Wayne.
I have a question.
Hang on one second. Let me bring you a microphone so everybody can hear you.
Christopher Thrasher, thank you, sir.
Oh, thanks, Chris. So this was the first time that you did an in-depth look at James Armistead Lafayette.
It is.
Correct, okay. When you were doing your research concerning him, what were some of your sources?
So ironically, if you go to the History Channel, they have some great information. Yeah. But also Dr. Thrasher, he actually found there was a book that he found that had some nuance, some fictional elements, but it was based loosely on the experiences of James. So I saw some of his close calls and try to embody that. And also, if you go to the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, and of course the Lafayette Society, every time you go to one of your events, you see his picture up there. So I've seen his face. And so as a person who does this kind of work, I knew who he was. So that was the beginning of the conversation. But going into the archive and looking at, like I said, the History Channel and watching a few of the videos and seeing some of the videos from historic Williamsburg, I actually watched those performers and watched and heard historians talking about him. And there were some different takes. One person said he couldn't read, another person said that he could read. And I think that kind of like what he says, the records are so inconsistent, you can't tell for sure. But I knew he was close to William and they grew up together. I had a feeling he could at least, make out some letters. So, and because he was so effective as a spy, I knew that much of what he did had to depend on some phonics, some understanding of the symbols, the written word, I should say. So I had to guess at some of those things because there were some narratives that conflicted or kind of muddied the waters a bit. Y'all can help us to clarify those things.
I believe for his master, he did a lot of the inventory and ordering of supplies and that sort of thing. So he definitely had some skills with mathematics and English language. So I don't know how, like you say, the documentation is lacking as it was for a lot of enslaved men and women. But I think you have to assume that he did speak and write.
Yeah, and I think that was, and that's what I played into the piece. I think that was an asset to the British and to the Americans, right? You can read and write. We can do some things here. They didn't realize it was also a threat. And I think he could read with the British. He could probably read and write a lot better than he let on. But with Lafayette, he probably was writing whole tomes like, "Hey, check this out," because he wanted to perform the best he could, and he probably got even better amongst the American soldiers. Oh yeah, thank you. Good job, Brad.
What about his family? What about the Armistead Lafayette family?
Mm-hmm.
Did he have a family? Did he have children?
And so I'm going to yield to you all because the research that I saw indicated that he did have a wife, and on record there were possible children, but it was inconclusive. We do know that we've had connections to some of his descendants. I don't know if they're here tonight. I know we were hoping to have somebody come tonight to share about that lineage. So I don't know much. What do you all know any more about his lineage?
Yes, she's just asking about the descendants. There's two brothers. One lives in North Carolina, one lives in Virginia. I met them at Yorktown last October.
Wow.
And we did extend an invitation to them, but they're professional men and very busy. So I don't think they were able to come. Yes, direct descendants. Now, he did have, according to Stephen Seals at Colonial Williamsburg, in his performance, he talks about his nephews that he bought after he gained his freedom. Mm-hmm. He bought them so that they could then earn money and buy their own freedom. Because at that time in Virginia, that's the only way, as you said, the master, if he wanted to, could not free his slaves. Mm-hmm. So the only way to do that is if they could earn enough money to buy their freedom. And then if you had a master who was willing to accept terms of payment, then you could do that. So he did do that, and his nephews did win their freedom. As far as sons or daughters, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Hank, I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because a couple of sources mentioned that he became a slave owner, and they just left it at that. And I think that's very irresponsible and dangerous to just say that. Well, it wasn't so bad, shoot, right? It was a form of building community, right, and solidarity, and saying, well, if this is the best way for us to stay in community, I'll be your master on the books, because manumission was not easily done or accomplished, especially not by a Black man. Thank you for clarifying that.
First of all, kudos again. Let's give him another round of applause.
Thank God, thank God.
I know you took some license with the facts and things. You had to put this thing together, but I wasn't clear about the reunion. Did that actually happen, and when was that?
It did. So it was, I don't know the exact date, but it was in 1824. So we estimate that he was 70 years old when that happened, or in his 70s. And it was in Yorktown. So it was a commemorative parade. You know, hey, we won the Battle of Yorktown. Lafayette's the hero. So he's going through the streets. I know there were over 1,000 people. I don't know the exact numbers, but there was a newspaper article. It's just so beautiful. I should have put the clip up of the newspaper article. It just says the two Lafayette called him forth, and the two embraced. So that's all I know. But I can only imagine what these older men were feeling as they reunited. You have any more details, y'all, about that encounter?
You know about that.
Madam President.
Excuse me, would that be during the tour?
It would be.
1824?
Yes. Yeah, it would have been on the tour.
Yeah, it would have been during the bicentennial tour. When Lafayette came back, he was invited back by John Quincy Adams. Who invited him back?
James
Monroe. Monroe invited him back in celebration of the 50th ish, and came back and toured, visiting every single state, bankrupting the territory of Alabama. They threw such a big party for him. But what was interesting too was America by that point was becoming increasingly racist as we move into the Civil War, both in the North and the South, just very strong social lines between white and black. But shared military service was one of those transcendent things. And so this is something that Lafayette continually did on his tour, but especially with James, you know, reaching out to old battle companions, people he had served with, fought alongside. And it kind of shook up some of the society folks at the time, but they couldn't say anything because it was Lafayette. I'll point out that also Andrew Jackson, who we do not think of as a bleeding heart liberal, when he was in New Orleans, called up some of the black veterans of the Louisiana Native Guard who had fought so bravely during the Battle of New Orleans, who were men of color of Haitian descent, and said, I want to honor them. They're my brothers in arms. They're my fellow veterans. They did so well here. And people couldn't deny General turned President Jackson either. But yeah, so that's part of the social context for that embrace. Yeah.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because this one of the main significant factors of Lafayette's farewell tour, and the reason President Monroe invited him was because the nation was deeply divided. There had been a bad depression in 1819. The United States was deeply divided over race. The Missouri Compromise, of course, was 1820. And there were deep political divisions. It was the first presidential race where none of the candidates had actually served in the American Revolution. And Andrew Jackson, I think probably safe to say, was the first populist presidential candidate. And the election had to be thrown into the House of Representatives because nobody had won a majority out of the field of four that they started with. So Monroe envisioned Lafayette as an area that everyone could agree on, could help unite the country. And because we are faced with something similar now, what's fantastic about our celebration of the 200th anniversary of Lafayette's farewell tour is, guess what? Our country is deeply divided again. And I think the Fayetteville State Chancellor said it very well just 2 years ago, that Lafayette is kind of a safe ground to discuss issues that can be very, very divisive and emotional, because he was such a champion of liberty and freedom and equality. So you just think about that and how there are echoes of the past even today.
And,
Yeah,
well said. And I actually had a question for you. Something that I appreciated about the story was the context you put it in, including the story of Jemmy and the Stono Rebellion, and also touching on the Black Loyalists and the fight for freedom and for the British to hold up their promises in Nova Scotia and Sierra Leone. Can you just tell us a little bit more about like your process as you put that all together?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. I try as a creator to always keep my mind open. I think I have some of my students who came in here, were in here earlier. No, I think they're like, I got my grade, I'm out. But Isaac but I don't know if I taught you this in the speech class, but I always tell my students I don't want to go too long, but there are 4 R's. I want you to always feel free to relieve yourself. Don't ask you for permission to go to the bathroom. You're a grown up. Even if you're a high school student, go to the bathroom. Rehydrate because your brain needs water. Refuel because your brain needs carbohydrates. And revelate. If you hear something that inspires you or catches you, like write it down, lock it in because you don't want to forget that. And so I have a combination of things that have happened. I've been studying this. I found the story of Jimmy from the archive, North Carolina archive, and it just really blew my mind because it let me know that was a turning point. Even though it was in South Carolina, it was a turning point for all the surrounding colonies. And so as I looked at that story, it's based very loosely on lore, right? There's not a whole lot of details to it, but I mean, it happened. But that story was a chance for me to really sink my teeth into what the fight for freedom really means and how it can transition depending upon context. But the story of Sergeant Peters, Thomas Peters, that was a beautiful story I did not know existed until my colleague, Christy Norris, who runs the education program at the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, had found that. It was part of the curriculum material they brought up. And I just read that and I thought, that's amazing. And then one of my good friends, let me just name drop, Sterling K. Brown, has recently produced a show on Hulu called Washington Black, about the Black community up in Nova Scotia and how they started a community there. And there's still Black people in Nova Scotia now that continue to walk in a certain level of dignity and also a historical understanding of who they are because they were allowed that space, because they fought for it and they earned it. So the research I've done in that area has been just from these different elements that as I learn about something, I hold on to it. And I did not know until I learned about Sergeant Peters that Sierra Leone was started from there. That was really, that blew my mind. Because I mean, you think of, especially I tell kids who are of African descent who watch my shows, you come from something. You all come from something. But I think kids of African descent oftentimes don't hear that. You think of, well, they were slaves and Abraham Lincoln freedom. And then yay for Abraham Lincoln, he's a hero. And Frederick Douglass said some good speeches too, right? And you keep it moving. But they were always white and Black and Native American fighting for this project, right? And so the fact that they felt that they had, like you said, the things became much more racist and divisive into the 19th century, but they had a level of dignity and a forum to even fight and advocate. Like, Thomas Peters became a Black loyalist leader. A Black loyalist was almost a political party. That was something that rose up, a group of people that rose up and said, we want these rights. We want to have these things done. And slavery was still legal in England. They didn't abolish slavery until 1833. So we're talking about the 18th century, a Black man saying, no, you promised us freedom and you're going to give it to us. And him not being summarily killed or just put into slavery or ignored, but given a country, that blew my mind. So there's more research to be done on that. But just to know that there's still a community up in Nova Scotia. So when I'll close with this, when I embody James Lafayette, he says they can have Africa, they can have Canada, they can have all of Europe. Black people started to move and pollinate in those areas because they were allowed that space and started new lives. So there are people who are generations back, people of African descent in Europe, generations back, people of African descent throughout Canada, and generations back, people of American descent in Africa, Sierra Leone, Liberia, right? And so it's just exciting to know that it wasn't about just being a possession, being freed, and now figure it out. There have been agents of change throughout the world. Thank you for asking that question. Yeah. And I got to let people know I know Sterling K. Brown that too.
So I want to dive in a little bit more to this bond of military service in this town. One of the reasons that Fayetteville is diverse as it is because one of the ways still to win American citizenship is to serve in her armed forces. Mm-hmm. And so would you all as a panel talk a little bit about that, this tie, of course, between the two Lafayettes, but I think the tie even today of those that have come from so many places that have chosen then to serve our nation in the cloth of our nation, as we say, and then have chosen to stay here in Fayetteville and how that impacts the place that we call home.
I mean, one of the things that I just kept thinking about, and this ties to Fayetteville, I promise, is when you get to World War I and World War II, you have all of these African American men and women who serve. And major Black newspapers, such as the Pittsburgh Courier, specifically, starts what they call the Double V campaign. We're going to fight and we're going to win a victory over fascism overseas, but also a victory over fascism, meaning Jim Crow, at home. And that the truest act of patriotism is to perfect our country and to create a more perfect union in that way. And so I was just thinking about that when you're also talking about the North Carolina Black Veterans Project that you're doing for the 250th, where some of the biggest pushes come out of the Black community of we need to fulfill these promises. One of the Black patriots, he's a little bit of a Yankee. He's up in Connecticut. Is Lemuel Haynes, who's the first Black man to be ordained as a pastor in what becomes the United States. And he writes this letter called Liberty Further Extended, where he's talking about breaking down the Declaration of Independence. He's like, here's how we make this real. And it wouldn't be me if I also didn't bring in that as part of the French military assistance, there were also troops that came from what would become Haiti, who served on the Patriot side at the Battle of Savannah. And in the 1990s, a group of Haitian Americans financed a statue commemorating these Haitian freedom fighters in a statue in one of those squares in downtown Savannah. They've got all those little pocket parks, remembering that because, I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the Yoda, fear leads to the dark side, because part of the reason we get this increasing racism in the 19th century is because all of a sudden after the American Revolution, you have the French Revolution, but then the Haitian Revolution, where it's like, okay, we're going to demand absolute freedom, an end to slavery. And any ideas of, the American Revolution started this universal thing for a lot of white Americans, it's like, no. This is different. And we're going to put more restrictions on citizenship. We're going to put more restrictions on voting. We're going to pass these laws to remove the right to vote in the 1830s from Black North Carolina men, and all this kind of thing, and redefine it around race. And so then we have to fight a civil war and then pushing again and again and again. But one reason, I've lived in a few towns in the South. One reason that Fayetteville is a little bit more residentially integrated to come back to Fayetteville is because of VA home loans. Right. And so the same redlining that you'll get, the same segregation you'll get in other cities isn't as strong here because we have so many veterans who are buying homes across the town for the past several decades. And that allows us to create a more integrated community. Not that we're perfect, but a more integrated community from that baseline on up. So there's a very long professorial answer for you.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I'm almost ashamed to ask this question, but I had never heard of manumission. Is that what you called it?
Yes. Yeah.
Was that just Virginia or was that the whole South?
That was the whole South. It was now. I don't think there was one solitary policy because every General Assembly for every state or every colony set their rules, but they tended to follow suit with one another because as they're watching this force rise up, free Black people, communities. There's a man named Isaac Carter. And he's part of the Harlow Patriots, right? A whole community of strong men who came and fought the Revolutionary War and then came back and put their funds and their pensions into their community and built it. That became scary because if I want to own slaves, I can't have them looking across the thicket and seeing you being free over there. So every bit of protocol that you could put in to become an obstacle to freedom or to your self-understanding of humanity was enacted. So yeah, the limiting manumission became, I think I called it earlier, kind of brakes on abolition, right? So you could still do it, but you had to jump through so many hoops.
So many hoops, so much red tape. And we saw that with the assembly, the Virginia Assembly being like, well, we don't have your military records, so we can't do it. The estimates we have is about 2% of enslaved people could be freed at some point in their lives or would be freed at some point in their lives, between 1% to 2%, which is vanishingly small because of all of these restrictions that were put on there. But Fayetteville also had a free Black community from very early on. We have Hiram Revels was born here, the first African-American to serve as a U.S. Senator. We have the Leary family, one of whom was fighting alongside John Brown at Harper's Ferry, right? Again, I realize I'm at FTCC, one last FSU plug. We're one of the few HBCUs. We were one of the first HBCUs, historically Black colleges or universities, that was founded by the local Black community, especially in the South, putting their money together. And to have that kind of money, having those $137, in 1867 meant you had something going on before 1867 to be able to pull that together. And so that's really part of my pride in the Sandhills, is this was a place of liberty that you could find within, not perfect liberty, but people could create these spaces for freedom, even before the Civil War.
And I will say, I don't believe in coincidences. I think part of Lafayette's legacy, I hope he's smiling about this right now, is that he was a devout abolitionist. And so much of the work he did, it still resonates with us today. He fought against the odds. I mean, like you said, in that 2%, James Armistead Lafayette is in that 2% because a dignitary came from another country and said, I'm writing a letter, and then I'm going to be in this battle for 2 years to go through this red tape. Can you imagine someone doing that for you? But he knew that work was important. In addition to all the other work he did, even coming back and doing the tour to unite the country, it was unite the country and speak of and embody equality and equity.
So, Sonny, you're referring to the letter, of course, that Lafayette wrote in support
yes,
of James' freedom. And the simple statement, it appears to me he is entitled to every reward the situation can admit. Compare the results from Lafayette's understated request, if you will, and the tremendous response that it got. James did earn his freedom through the legislature. Lafayette was a figure on the world stage of liberty, freedom, justice, and equality, so much so that when he wrote a letter support the revolution in Greece, Poland, South American countries, the people responded with fundraising efforts, the government responded. And contrast that to some leaders who bluff and bluster and threaten. And I think the contrast is truly dramatic.
Yeah. Sutton, get that young lady a microphone. I think she can project, but we'll get her a microphone for the folks at home.
What is your favorite Lafayette story?
Oh, that's a good one. Your favorite Lafayette story. Tell us a story. It's storytelling time. Well, I will tell you from me, and it's just because I'm new. I'm going to let them dig deeper, but I'm new to this. That story of him coming back for that tour in 1824 and stopping everything with thousands of adoring fans and seeing one person that was his friend, his brother, and stopping his chariot and saying, James, and them coming together as two old men and hugging. I love that story. It's a short story, but it's so sweet. It's full. It's rich.
This lady next to me is not only the new president of Lafayette Society, she's a relatively new member. And I'm going to ask her to speak for a moment about her favorite Lafayette story, which by now I am sure you have one.
At least one.
She's going to hate me for this.
I do. I don't know if I have one favorite Lafayette story. Like he said, I am relatively new and not a history buff at all. But my story is actually more of my story coming into the Lafayette Society. So for me, I'm not a history buff. Let me say that again. Not a history buff at all. But as I've come into this society and being part of the Lafayette Society, which you should all be members of the Lafayette Society, by the way. If you're not, make sure you go to our website. But for me, it was coming into this and learning about Lafayette, and not just learning about Lafayette from the individuals that are in the Lafayette Society, but seeing that they embody that. They embody the freedom. They embody being able to be a collective and enjoying each other. I was coming on board like, ooh, Lafayette Society, really? I don't know about this. But the way they embraced me, the way I felt part of the team, it showed me that what they felt about Lafayette, I needed to learn more about this man. So for me, it's just the experience I've had being a part of the Lafayette Society.
Well said.
Resonates, right?
Yeah.
It's very recognizing. I want to say, if you haven't had a chance to visit the majestic statue of Lafayette downtown off, is it Grove Street there? Green Street.
Yeah.
Please go visit. You know, we've had a lot of conflict and dispute in this nation about statues. That's one statue I think we can all get behind. Like, and it mentions that he was an abolitionist before his time, stood up against the tide. And so I love that. I love that statue. I love what it stands for. And I think we should celebrate those.
And the inscription we changed in 2017 to be more complete. That, as you know, was the horrible riot in Charlottesville.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first times we saw these deep wounds open in our nation over race, this severely in many, many years. And a friend of mine had said, you better watch out. They're going to tear down your statue there. I said, come on now. He was on the right side of justice, and it was the wrong war anyway. But it got me to thinking, and I talked to my board, and instead of just saying Lafayette, your birth, your death, we added what it says now, which is 25 words or less on why he indeed was such a true hero and opponent of slavery and oppression of all kinds, I think is my favorite part of that. So yeah, if you haven't been down there, just a real quick note about the sculptor. His name was Ferenc Varga, and he was born in Hungary. He emigrated to this country, to Detroit. And some of the outdoor statues in Detroit, many of those are his, including Revolutionary War hero, another foreigner, Casimir Pulaski, 16-foot tall statue. He was commissioned to a bust of Pope John, and it's in the Vatican now. So this is the guy who did the statue that you see in Cross Creek Park downtown. It is beautiful, and I'll bang our drum a little bit. The Lafayette Society renovated that whole area. Before, it was surrounded by a sea of thorny rose bushes and things like that. You couldn't even get near him. Yet he was the most approachable of all Revolutionary War heroes. Yeah. And we've renovated both sides now, so there's a welcoming, beautiful green space in downtown Fayetteville. We see people having picnics there, gathering. During the Black Lives Matter protest, they gathered there when they couldn't gather at the Market House. So, yeah, take a trip down there sometime.
Sometime will be tomorrow as we celebrate Lafayette's birthday at 320 Hay Street at Hay Street United Methodist Church. So that'd be a good time to go there to the statue. It starts at noon and ends at 3. So you can go to the statue first, take you some pictures, and then come to Hay Street United Methodist Church Fellowship Hall at 320 Hay Street. Okay.
Very good.
Can I answer Sutton's question?
Yes, sir, you can.
So here's my favorite Lafayette story. So this is about a boy named Lewis who was growing up in Kentucky. And he had a family, some of whom were free, some of whom were Native American, some of whom were Black. He himself was in slavery. And he wasn't sure how he felt about it. He kept getting sold to different families when he was growing up, when he was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. When he's 14, he's sitting on a fence as Lafayette comes by on this big tour. And Lafayette sees 14-year-old Lewis sitting on this fence, and Lafayette takes his hat and tips it back at him as a sign of respect. And that was the moment the young Lewis said, hey, yeah, I don't like being a slave. I want to be free someday because I'm a person and I'm going to be free someday. And he had all kinds of trials, tribulations, whatever else. He got married. His wife got sold down the river to the deep south. He got married again. He had a master who was really cruel to him, but eventually he was able to get his freedom, made his way to Massachusetts. And he was able to, A, make so much money, there's a house named for him. B, he started a bunch of important political clubs. And C, he was able to get himself elected to the Massachusetts state legislature so that he could pass laws to make sure that everyone was free. And it all started with Lafayette tipping his hat to him and him making a decision that he was going to build a better life for himself. That's my favorite Lafayette story.
And with that said, I hope that in some way tonight, I, embodying James Armistead Lafayette, have tipped my hat unto thee to let you know you can do better, you can be better, and we're better together. Love y'all. God bless you.
Thank you all. Hank and his bookstore downtown have brought some great resources that you can purchase, books on Lafayette, but a children's book called A Spy Called James that he has. If you want to know more, grab a hold of those. They're at the table in the back. Take a look at the Lafayette Society. If you're on the board, if you would, just stand for me. If you're on our Lafayette Society board, thank these fine folks for all they do. And once again, will you stand to your feet and put your hands together and say a thanks to Dr. Sonny Kelly? And thanks to my partner in crime, Dr. Chris Thrasher, who is a professor of history here. Come out to FSU, FTCC, join our history programs. Take a look at our communication programs where Dr. Kelly teaches. Come back to see us again. Have a great night. Be safe. Thank you.